She had always been quiet, the kind of person who watched the world more than she participated in it. Growing up, she noticed very early that people around her had their own ideas of what she should do, what she could do, and what she would never be able to do. Music was something that fascinated her, but she quickly learned that it was not something the people in her life considered important. They said it was a waste of time, that she should focus on something practical, something that would give her money or security. They didn't understand that music was the only place where she felt alive, the only place where she could breathe without the weight of the world pressing down on her. Her first encounter with a piano was not in a music school or a concert hall. It was in a small room at a community center. It's the kind of place where old furniture creaked and sunlight spilled through dusty windows. The piano itself was scratched and worn, some keys chipped, others sticking slightly. To anyone else, it looked ordinary, almost broken, but to her, it was magic. She remembered sitting on the cold wooden bench for the first time, her small fingers hovering uncertainly over the keys. She didn't know the names of the notes, didn't know any formal rules, but she knew that she wanted to try. That first touch was hesitant, awkward, a few off sounds mingling with the quiet room. But even then, she felt a spark inside her, something that said, "This is where you belong, at home." She had no piano, no space to practice, and no encouragement. Her parents worked hard, each day bringing worries about bills, chores, and survival. They were tired, and the last thing they wanted was a daughter who spent hours with her hands on keys that didn't belong to her. Still, she found moments. In the early mornings, before anyone woke up, she would play on the small keyboard she had saved money to buy. The sounds were crude, sometimes off-pitch, but they were hers, and each note made her heart beat faster with hope. She spent hours learning simple songs, each time mastering a new piece, giving her a sense of accomplishment that school or work never had. School was no better. Teachers sometimes praised students for sports, for grades, for public speaking, but music was rarely recognized. When she tried to share her love for piano, she was told it was a hobby, not a real pursuit. Other children were curious at first, but they quickly lost interest when they realized she didn't play like professionals. She didn't have expensive lessons, a perfect technique, or a grand piano. Instead, she had persistence, imagination, and a desire that burned quietly inside her. Even when other children laughed at her mistakes or made comments like, "You'll never be good," she didn't give up. She would retreat to her corner, shut the door, and play until her fingers ached, letting the music wash away the sting of those words. Her teachers didn't make it easier. Some were impatient, some dismissive, and a few openly said that music was not for someone like her. "You need to focus on academics," they said. "Music won't pay your bills." Those words sank deep, leaving marks that made her doubt herself sometimes. But in the quiet of her room, she reminded herself that these voices did not define her. She was not their opinions. She was the sound of the piano under her fingers, the melody that no one else could hear but that existed perfectly in her imagination. She also faced moments of loneliness. Friends would invite her to other activities, outings she could never afford or would have no interest in because her free time was dedicated to music. There were nights when she felt frustrated, wondering if her obsession with piano was foolish, if she would ever be able to play for anyone who cared. At times, the keyboard gathered dust as doubt crept in, whispering that she would never be good enough. Yet somehow, the call of the keys was stronger than fear. The pull of sound, of harmony, of creating something beautiful, always drew her back. What kept her going was the way music made her feel. It wasn't about applause or recognition. It was about the way a chord could lift her spirits, the way a melody could make her forget the noise of the world. Sometimes when she played, she imagined an audience, even if it existed only in her mind. She imagined people listening, smiling, nodding, their faces lighting up. These imagined moments fueled her practice sessions. Letting her push past frustration and exhaustion, she found teachers eventually, though not the ones in grand schools. One elderly musician who had retired from performing saw her dedication and agreed to guide her. The lessons were slow and demanding. He didn't care about instant results. He corrected mistakes with patience, taught her scales, rhythm, and technique, but also emphasized the importance of feeling the music. "Don't just play notes," he would say. "Make them live. Make them breathe." She clung to that advice, practicing relentlessly, imagining each note as a living thing that carried a story. Even with guidance, progress was not easy. There were days when her hands seemed clumsy, when she hit wrong notes over and over, when the frustration felt unbearable. But she refused to quit. She learned to see mistakes not as failures, but as lessons, each one bringing her closer to the sound she envisioned. She began recording herself, listening carefully, adjusting, practicing again. Slowly, the music inside her head began to match the music her fingers produced. Along the way, she met skeptics. People who knew her background, her modest circumstances, and her lack of formal credentials often said, "It's cute you're trying, but you won't make it." Some laughed. Some shook their heads. Each word stung, but they also strengthened her resolve. She realized that if she allowed their doubts to define her, she would never reach her potential. Instead, she decided to play for herself first, to grow quietly, unseen, until she was ready to show the world. Her dedication shaped her life in small, quiet ways. She woke early to practice before school, stayed late to play after chores were done, and used every spare moment to improve. Her social life was limited, but she didn't mind. She preferred the company of music, the sense of accomplishment, the small victories that came from mastering a difficult piece. Each day, she felt herself becoming stronger, not just in skill, but in confidence, even if only private confidence, the kind that grows silently until it is ready to face the world. What made her story compelling was not talent alone. Many had talent. It was her persistence, her love for something everyone else dismissed, that set her apart. She had learned to embrace struggle, to find beauty in the imperfect, to see hope in tiny victories. Every cracked key she pressed, every wrong note she corrected, every moment she spent in solitude with music added to a foundation that would one day allow her to astonish the world. Looking back, she would remember these early years not as wasted time, but as the most important period of her life. These were the years when she learned patience, determination, and the quiet joy of pursuing something purely because it called to her heart. These were the years when she discovered that failure was not the opposite of success, but a necessary part of growth. She understood now, even as a young person, that every struggle, every whispered doubt, every lonely night at the piano was shaping her into someone capable of amazing others in ways no one could predict. And so, she continued, playing whenever she could, pushing herself forward, believing in something that others could not yet see. Each note she struck was a step toward a future where no one would doubt her again. She practiced in silence, with quiet determination, unaware that one day her music would leave everyone around her frozen, and all the doubts would vanish in the face of something pure, beautiful, and undeniable. She had been practicing for years in quiet, unnoticed spaces, but now she found herself stepping into a world full of eyes and expectations. The community center had organized a small public event, and someone had suggested that she'd play a piece on the old piano there. At first, the thought terrified her. All her life, she had played in solitude, where mistakes were hers alone, and no one judged her. Now, she would be under the gaze of people who might laugh, criticize, or dismiss her. The fear was real, but so was a small spark of excitement. This was a chance to finally show, if only a little, what years of practice had built. The room was modest, hall with peeling paint, and wooden floors that creaked under every step. Chairs were arranged in neat rows, and a few people had already started gathering, chatting quietly as they waited for the program to begin. She walked slowly toward the piano, feeling every pair of eyes turning toward her. Some were curious, some indifferent, and some already skeptical. A few whispered to each other, glancing at her worn shoes and simple clothes, assuming she would falter. Those looks stung, but she focused on the keys ahead. Her hands shook slightly as she touched them, feeling the familiar texture beneath her fingers. Despite the wear and tear, the piano seemed to welcome her. People expected something small, something forgettable. A few children sat with bored expressions. Adults exchanged polite smiles. And some older attendees looked at her as if she were about to embarrass herself. She sensed their judgment, but didn't respond to it. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, inhaling slowly, letting the memory of years spent practicing flood her mind. She thought of late nights, of fingers aching from relentless repetition, of moments when she had wanted to give up but didn't. All of that had led her to this moment. When she opened her eyes, she began to play. The first few notes were soft, almost tentative. Some people shifted in their seats, their initial interest wavering. They were waiting for a mistake, expecting a stumble. She pressed on, slowly building confidence with every note. The melody started to form, gentle and careful, yet deliberate. Even in its simplicity, there was something different about the way she played. It wasn't flashy or loud, but it was honest. Her fingers moved with a quiet determination, producing sounds that felt alive, that carried the weight of effort, hope, and passion. As the music progressed, the audience started to notice. The whispers faded, the restless movement stopped, and attention focused on her and the piano. There was no dramatic entrance or showy technique, just music that came from the heart. The subtle shifts in tone, the gentle rise and fall of each phrase, spoke volumes. It was as if the piano itself had transformed, responding to her dedication and translating it into sound that touched something deep in the listeners. Some people glanced at each other, surprised at the beauty that emerged from such a modest setting. A few leaned forward, captivated by the purity of her playing. There was a sense of disbelief in the room, a quiet astonishment that grew with every measure. Nobody expected this from someone so young, so quiet, so seemingly ordinary. And yet here she was, commanding the space, not with showmanship, but with sincerity and skill that could not be ignored. She noticed small details in the room that might have distracted her. A creaking floorboard, the occasional cough, the hum of conversation at the back, but she ignored them. Her attention was entirely on the music. Each note, each chord, was carefully placed. She allowed herself to be fully immersed, letting the music carry her forward, trusting that her years of practice would guide her hands. In doing so, she created something more than a performance. She created a shared moment, a bridge between her inner world and the people around her. There were moments when the melody swelled, growing stronger and more confident. Her fingers flew over the keys with fluidity and precision, yet there was a human touch to every note, a reminder that she was not a machine but a person pouring her soul into the instrument. Some listeners felt their breath catch, as though the music had reached places inside them they hadn't known existed. Eyes widened, heads tilted, and hands that had tapped on knees or held programs now rested silently, attentive and moved. Her playing told a story, even though no words were spoken. It was a story of struggle, of quiet determination, of nights spent alone perfecting every note. It was a story that mirrored her life, facing doubt, confronting skepticism, and continuing despite the odds. People may have expected failure, but instead, they were witnessing the opposite. She was proving, without a word, that dedication and passion could overcome expectation and prejudice. The room felt different now, more alive, more aware, as if the music had created a bubble where nothing else mattered but the sound, the feeling, and the connection. She had chosen a piece that was not overly complex, but emotionally rich. Every phrase was intentional, each pause measured. She allowed the softer moments to linger, letting listeners absorb the emotion before moving into stronger, more resonant chords. There was no rush, no attempt to impress. The impact came from sincerity, from the quiet intensity that radiated through her fingertips. Even those who did not typically notice music found themselves held in a kind of awe. Unable to look away or think about anything else, the audience began to realize that this was not just a casual performance. She was telling her own story, a story of persistence and unseen effort through the piano. Every note, every transition seemed to carry her journey, from nights of practice alone to the fear of judgment, and finally to the courage of facing the public for the first time. People who had doubted her, who had assumed she would fail, started to feel something shift inside them. It was as if the music was gently breaking down their preconceptions, forcing them to confront the reality that talent and determination do not always announce themselves with loud fanfare. Some of the older attendees exchanged glances, clearly impressed. Younger children, who had been fidgeting or whispering, now sat still, captivated by the sound. A few adults felt their eyes well up with tears, though they tried to hide it. It was rare to witness something so unexpectedly moving, especially in such an ordinary setting. She could sense the change, feel it in the subtle energy of the room. This was more than just playing piano. This was creating a moment that would linger in people's memories, despite her nervousness at the start. She found herself gaining confidence as the piece continued. The music seemed to take on a life of its own, carrying her along, guiding her hands, and giving her courage. Each measure built on the last, and by the midpoint, the room was fully attentive. The doubts and whispers that had surrounded her at the beginning were gone, replaced by silence filled with anticipation. The people who had expected failure were now witnessing skill, emotion, and dedication in motion. They were being shown in real time that assumptions are often wrong and that true talent can appear where it is least expected. She was aware of her audience, but not in a way that distracted her. Their reactions, though subtle, inspired her to continue pouring herself into the music. She felt connected to them without a word being exchanged, a silent understanding that this moment was shared, that her effort was reaching beyond herself. Her heart beat in time with the rhythm she played, and for a brief period, the outside world ceased to exist. There was only the piano, the music, the people who had come to watch. By the end of the piece, her fingers trembled slightly, not from fatigue, but from the intensity of emotion. She played the final notes slowly, letting them fade into the quiet of the room. For a moment, there was silence. No applause, no movement, just the lingering resonance of the last chord. The audience was still, caught in the aftermath, processing what they had just experienced. It was a silence filled with awe, surprise, and respect. They had expected someone to falter, someone to be ordinary. Instead, they had witnessed something extraordinary, and the impact was immediate and profound. Then, slowly, the room reacted. Applause erupted, spontaneous and heartfelt. People stood, clapping, some wiping away tears they hadn't realized had formed. The whispers of doubt were gone, replaced by expressions of admiration and amazement. She didn't smile immediately, not because she wasn't happy, but because the experience had been so intense, so transformative, that she needed a moment to absorb it herself. This was a new experience, receiving acknowledgement not for potential, not for effort alone, but for the tangible. Moving reality of her music, the applause continued, growing louder and more enthusiastic. People who had been skeptical earlier were now shouting praise, leaning over to tell each other how remarkable it was. Children clung to their parents, repeating quietly, "She's so good." Older attendees nodded, some shaking their heads in disbelief. For the first time, she saw herself not just as someone practicing in quiet rooms, but as a musician whose music could touch others, whose dedication and passion could break through assumptions and judgments. Afterward, she stepped away from the piano, heart still racing, mind still swirling with emotion. People came forward, offering compliments, asking questions, expressing how moved they had been. She answered politely, softly, never letting the praise overwhelm her. She knew this was only the beginning, a small step into a larger world, and that there would be many more challenges ahead. But for now, she allowed herself to feel pride, satisfaction, and the quiet joy of having faced fear and exceeded expectation. This moment stayed with her long after the event ended. She knew the audience would remember it too, that the music had left a mark on everyone present. She had learned something important, that fear and doubt can coexist with talent, but courage and persistence can transform them into moments of wonder. She had shown in a simple community hall that passion and dedication could silence judgment and touch hearts. And that knowledge, that realization, became a powerful part of her journey. Giving her confidence to come after the event, the memory of the audience's astonished faces stayed with her. For the first time, she realized that people could truly see her talent. not just imagine it or judge her based on appearances. She kept thinking about how the room had gone quiet, how every whisper had faded as her music filled the space. It was a powerful moment, one that she replayed in her mind repeatedly. Savoring the feeling of having touched others with her piano, she knew that this moment was only the beginning. And yet it gave her courage. She began to think about performing in other spaces, in bigger halls, for more people, even though the thought made her nervous. The memory of doubt in their eyes fueled her determination. She wanted to prove, not only to others, but to herself, that her music could matter, that her years of quiet dedication had not been wasted. She began seeking opportunities to play wherever she could, small performances that would challenge her to grow and to face larger audiences. She signed up for a local music competition, something she had never imagined she could do. The idea terrified her. She was entering a space filled with experienced performers, many with formal training and years of recognition. She questioned herself constantly. What if she failed? What if she embarrassed herself? But beneath the fear, there was a persistent voice saying she was ready, that she had something special to share, that her music could speak where words could not. She decided to face the fear, knowing that growth only came from stepping into the unknown. The day of the competition arrived, and she walked into the hall with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The stage looked enormous, the lights bright, and the audience filled the seats with expectations and curiosity. She could hear conversations, laughter, and the rustle of programs, but she focused on the piano waiting at the center. Every step felt heavy with anticipation, yet she felt a strange calm in her chest. Years of practice had prepared her for this moment, even if no one else had seen it yet. When she sat down, she took a deep breath and placed her fingers on the keys. The room seemed suddenly quieter, the conversations fading into distant hums. She remembered the advice of her old teacher: don't just play notes. Make them live. Make them breathe. She let the thought guide her. Her fingers began to move, slow and deliberate at first, building confidence as the melody unfolded. The audience watched, some curious, some skeptical, but soon, just like before, the music captured their attention. Her performance was not about technical perfection alone. It was about expression. Every note carried her journey, the hours spent practicing alone, the moments of doubt, the perseverance that had become part of who she was. She played with feeling, letting the piano tell a story beyond her words. The audience could sense it, the emotion that radiated from her hands, the sincerity behind each phrase. People leaned forward, captivated, as if the music itself demanded their attention. Midway through the piece, she felt a shift. The nerves melted away, replaced by a flow of confidence and connection. She allowed herself to fully immerse in the music, letting it guide her rather than trying to control it. The notes rose and fell like waves, moving with emotion, carrying listeners along a journey they could feel but not see. The hall was quiet, every person absorbed in the sounds, lost for a moment in the shared experience. She realized that music had a power far beyond what she had imagined, a power to move hearts, change moods, and create understanding without a single word as the final chords approached. She played with a delicate strength, letting the notes linger and resonate through the room. The silence that followed the last sound was profound, heavier than any applause could have been. People were frozen, caught between disbelief and admiration. They had expected an ordinary performance, perhaps a nervous and hesitant attempt. But instead, they had witnessed something extraordinary. She had transformed the space, even briefly, into a place of wonder and reflection. The applause eventually came. Hesitant at first, then growing into a roar of appreciation and admiration. People stood, clapped, some wiped tears from their eyes, others nodded in silent respect. She felt a mixture of relief and pride, but mostly, she felt the quiet satisfaction of having expressed herself fully and authentically. This was not about winning or recognition. It was about the connection she had created, the message she had conveyed through music alone. After the competition, people approached her, expressing surprise and admiration. Many asked questions about her background, her practice routine, and her inspiration. She answered softly with humility, never letting the praise overshadow her focus. She knew that this was one experience in a long journey, a stepping stone toward something larger, but it reaffirmed her belief in her abilities and her purpose. The encouragement she received inspired her to keep pushing forward, to explore more opportunities, and to continue growing as a musician. Despite the success, she remained grounded. She knew that the path ahead would have challenges, that not every audience would respond with awe, and that setbacks were inevitable. But she had learned something essential: the power of perseverance and the importance of believing in herself. Even when others doubted, she had faced fear, embraced uncertainty, and found a way to express the depth of her passion. These lessons became part of her identity, shaping not only her music, but her approach to life itself. Her journey continued with small performances in cafes, community events, and local gatherings. Each experience was a chance to refine her skills, understand her audience, and deepen her connection with music. She learned to handle nervousness, to adapt to different environments, and to trust her instincts. Each performance, whether met with applause or polite silence, contributed to her growth, reinforcing her dedication and love for piano. She began to notice subtle changes within herself: increased confidence, resilience, and the ability to convey emotion more effectively. Along the way, she faced people who questioned her, who doubted her commitment, or who underestimated her abilities. Each encounter reminded her of the importance of staying true to her path. She understood that external validation was temporary and unreliable, but the internal satisfaction of pursuing her passion and developing her talent was enduring. She embraced challenges as opportunities to learn and to strengthen her skills. Never letting criticism derail her focus, she also developed a sense of empathy through her music. Observing audience reactions, reading subtle expressions, and sensing emotional responses helped her understand human experiences beyond her own. Music became a bridge, connecting her to people she might never meet or know deeply. It gave her a sense of purpose and belonging, a reminder that her dedication could inspire comfort and move others. Over time, she built a routine that balanced practice, performance, and personal growth. She experimented with new pieces, explored different styles, and challenged herself with compositions that pushed her limits. Each step of progress brought new satisfaction and fueled her desire to continue. She discovered that mastery was not a destination, but a continuous journey, one that required patience, humility, and resilience. The experience of public performance also taught her about presence and awareness. She learned to focus entirely on the moment, to let go of distraction, and to channel her emotions into her playing. This mindfulness enhanced her connection to music, deepened her expressive abilities, and allowed her to create moments that resonated deeply with audiences. She realized that the most powerful performances were those that combined technical skill with genuine emotion, where the musician's story was embedded in every note. Through all of this, she remained humble, never forgetting the quiet nights spent practicing alone, the whispered doubts, and the small victories that shaped her early years. These memories grounded her, reminding her that talent alone was not enough. It was perseverance, dedication, and the willingness to face fear that made her journey meaningful. Each performance became a reflection of her growth, a testament to the countless hours of effort, and a reminder that she was capable of exceeding expectations. By the end of this stage in her life, she had grown not only as a musician, but as a person. She understood the value of patience, the importance of self-belief, and the impact of authentic expression. She had learned that failure was not a final verdict, but a step toward improvement. That doubt could coexist with progress, and that courage often meant performing even when fear was present. These lessons, woven into her music, became inseparable from her identity and her future ambitions. She continued to seek new challenges, knowing that the journey was far from over. Each performance, each audience, and each opportunity to share her music brought new experiences, lessons, and inspiration. The fear she once felt in public spaces had transformed into excitement, anticipation, and confidence. She had faced judgment, exceeded expectations, and discovered the power of music to connect, inspire, and move people. And with every note she played, she carried forward the quiet strength that had sustained her from the beginning, ready for whatever stage lay ahead. She had performed many times before, but the next event was different. It was a large hall, filled with hundreds of people she had never seen. The air was thick with expectation and curiosity. Everyone was there for the main event, but she had been invited to play beforehand. A prelude, a warm-up act for the crowd. The thought of facing so many eyes, so much space, was intimidating. Her hands trembled slightly as she approached the piano. The polished wood reflected the bright stage lights, and the keys glistened under the glow. She felt the weight of the audience's gaze before she even touched a note. She paused for a moment, letting the energy of the room sink in. Conversations murmured around her, some polite, some bored, and some skeptical. People had seen performers before, but few had seen someone like her quiet, unassuming, seemingly ordinary, standing alone before a grand instrument. Some whispered, assuming she would fumble, imagining her failure before the first sound. Others watched with curiosity, drawn by a sense that maybe, just maybe, something unexpected would happen. She took a deep breath, remembering every night spent practicing alone, every hour she'd invested in mastering her craft, every moment when she'd refused to quit despite doubt. All of that had prepared her for this moment. Her fingers hovered over the keys. The audience's chatter seemed distant, fading as she focused inward. She remembered the advice that had carried her through so many performances. Play from the heart. Let the music breathe. Let it tell a story. She began with a single, soft note. It was delicate and hesitant, a whisper into the vastness of the hall. She continued, letting each note flow naturally into the next. The melody was simple at first, calm, almost unassuming, but there was a depth to it that hinted at something more. The room began to notice. Conversation stopped. Eyes turned toward her, trying to understand what they were hearing. The music grew gradually, layering emotion upon emotion. Her hands moved with confidence now, guided by years of dedication. She allowed herself to feel every note, to let it express the struggles and triumphs of her journey. The audience felt it too. Some leaned forward, caught by the intensity and sincerity. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. The atmosphere shifted. What had begun as polite curiosity transformed into deep attention. The room was no longer filled with chatter and expectation. It was filled with presence, with shared focus, with something unspoken yet powerful. She played with a combination of control and freedom, balancing precision with expression. Each chord resonated, vibrating through the floor and into the hearts of those listening. She did not rush. She allowed the pauses to linger, the soft moments to breathe, creating a rhythm that was both deliberate and emotional. The audience, initially unsure of what to expect, was now fully absorbed. Some people sat frozen, captivated by the music and the story it seemed to tell without words. Others felt their emotions stirring, memories and feelings rising in response to the notes that echoed in the hall. There was a moment when she played a particularly delicate sequence, a series of notes that seemed to float in the air. The audience leaned in, silent, holding their breath. It was a fragile, intimate moment that contrasted with the grandeur of the stage. It created a tension that was almost tangible. The beauty of the melody, combined with the human vulnerability of her performance, struck a chord with everyone present. People realized they were witnessing something rare, something that could not be replicated simply by technique or showmanship. It was a story of dedication, courage, and authentic expression, communicated purely through sound. As she continued, the intensity of the music grew. The melody built, intertwining soft, gentle passages with stronger, more commanding ones. Each change in dynamics carried emotional weight, reflecting the journey she had taken to reach this point. The audience felt it as though they were traveling with her, experiencing the highs and lows, the moments of hesitation and the moments of triumph. It was a shared experience, intimate, despite the size of the hall, and it drew everyone closer in attention and emotion. She noticed subtle movements in the audience, a hand covering a mouth in awe, a tear slowly rolling down a cheek, a person leaning forward, completely absorbed. These small gestures encouraged her to continue, to pour more of herself into the performance. She played not for applause, not for recognition, but because it was the only way she could communicate fully, the only way she could express what words could not capture. The music became a bridge, connecting her to people who had come expecting little and now found themselves experiencing something unforgettable. Her focus never wavered. The bright lights, the large stage, and the crowd of hundreds were all background to the story she was telling with the piano. She felt a deep connection to each note, each phrase, allowing herself to be vulnerable, letting the music reveal her journey and emotions. The sound carried through the hall, creating an atmosphere of awe and wonder. For the first time, she understood the full power of her art, the way music could captivate, inspire, and transform the space it filled. Midway through the piece, she played a section with rapid, flowing sequences that showcased both technical skill and emotional depth. The audience was completely silent, frozen in attention. Every eye was on her, every ear straining to catch the subtle nuances of her performance. People who had initially doubted her ability now felt a profound respect and admiration. They had expected a simple prelude, perhaps a polite demonstration of effort. But what they were witnessing was mastery intertwined with raw emotion. The contrast between the unassuming performer and the power of her music created a sense of wonder and disbelief. She allowed herself to feel the energy of the room, to let it inform her playing. Each note became more than sound. It was a message, a story, an expression of perseverance, courage, and the triumph of dedication over doubt. She had been small and quiet for so long, overlooked and underestimated. And now her music was commanding attention in a way that words could never achieve. The realization strengthened her resolve and deepened her connection to the audience. It was no longer just about her journey. It was about the shared human experience, the recognition of effort, struggle, and triumph that everyone could relate to. The final section of the piece approached, and she slowed her pace slightly, allowing the melody to breathe. Each note was deliberate, resonant, and filled with emotion. The audience felt the intensity, the depth, and the humanity of her performance. Some were leaning forward, some had their eyes closed, some were holding their breath, and some were silently weeping. The room was suspended in a moment that felt timeless, as though the world outside had ceased to exist and only the music remained. She had created a space where everyone could feel, reflect, and connect without words. When she finally struck the last chord, it lingered, vibrating through the hall, and then gradually faded into silence. There was a pause, a stillness that seemed to stretch longer than any note, a moment of collective awe. No one moved immediately. The audience sat frozen, absorbing the impact of what they had just experienced. They had been taken on a journey they had not anticipated, moved by the beauty, emotion, and authenticity of her playing. What had started as a quiet prelude had transformed into a profound, unforgettable experience. Then, slowly applause began. At first, a few hesitant claps, then more and more, until the entire hall erupted in standing ovation. People shouted praise, called out expressions of amazement, and clapped with intensity. The room, which had been frozen in awe, now celebrated her talent and dedication. She stood quietly, letting the recognition wash over her. But she did not allow it to distract from the music she had just shared. She had learned that true fulfillment came from the act of playing, from the connection created, not from the applause alone. In the following days, she reflected on the performance. She realized that this was a turning point, a moment that would shape her confidence and her approach to music forever. The experience had shown her that fear and doubt could be overcome, that persistence and dedication could lead to moments of profound impact, and that the power of authenticity could touch hearts more deeply than any attempt to impress. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that her journey was far from over, but also knowing that she was capable of reaching audiences in ways that mattered deeply. The experience in that large hall stayed with her, reminding her that the most significant moments often come from facing fear. Embracing vulnerability and expressing oneself fully, she continued to practice, to perform, and to seek new opportunities. Each time carrying the memory of that audience, that frozen moment, and the realization that music could connect people in powerful, unexpected ways. The confidence she gained, the understanding of her own potential, and the joy of sharing her art became guiding forces, leading her toward future stages, larger audiences, and even more unforgettable moments. After the performance in the large hall, the response was overwhelming. People talked about it for days, sharing their experience with friends, family, and even strangers. Some had recorded snippets of her playing on their phones. But even these brief captures could not convey the full depth of what they had felt in the moment. Everyone who had been there seemed changed in some way. They had come expecting a simple act, perhaps a polite introduction to the evening, but instead, they had witnessed a profound expression of talent, dedication. In emotion, she herself felt a mixture of relief, pride, and quiet astonishment. Relief that the music had flowed as she intended, pride in having shared something so personal, and astonishment at how deeply it had affected others. She had spent so many years alone at the piano, practicing tirelessly, doubting herself, and facing skepticism from others, that this validation, though not her goal, felt transformative. She realized that she had not just performed, she had communicated, connected, and inspired without a single word. Word of her talent spread beyond the hall. Invitations arrived from other events, community gatherings, and local organizations. People wanted to hear her play, to experience the sincerity and power she conveyed through her music. She accepted cautiously,